Hello, everybody. If there is anybody out there, it's I'll just delete that one. So, oops. It's a smaller group of us tonight because Mike unfortunately is away. Um, so it's me, Shannon, and Karis, and we're going to be having a chat about housing law related matters. And if anyone's got any comments, please put them on the site. Sorry, put on the comments bit of the YouTube channel. I was just saying to the others, I haven't got a lot to say, but I thought I might just try and start a conversation if anyone's interested in joining in or commenting on it. On well, two things. One is the sort of future of legal aid type services. That may sound a bit grand of a thing to be talking about on a Monday night, but what I'm aware of is that you've got these legal aid deserts at the moment, and even where there isn't a desert, it's not as if there's a sort of massive plenty of lawyers out there for anybody in London, say. I mean, most people who try and find a solicitor in London, I think, will have had the experience of ringing around or emailing or whatever, and being told we haven't got capacity. So there's the thing that seems true to take away from all this is that the present system which was set up, I mean, I don't know, it's been going that I grew up with, as it were, as a lawyer, it doesn't work anymore, and that the legal aid agency aren't able to fund it, and the agent, and the organ, so many solicitors and law centres have closed down over the last 30 years, and much more over the last 15 years since the LASPO came in. That the question is, rather than bemoaning it, which we tend to do, is think of, is there any way that we could repopulate the legal aid deserts and provide services for the future, and maybe make the naive assumption that there will be services in the future that enable people to get the support they need. And what will those look like? And they may look something very different from what we've got now. And before I go on to that, I'll just say hello to our guests. We've got some comments. Which is not that one. So I got Ginger. Oops, sorry. I'll just get rid of that one, see if this works. Yeah, hello to you too, Ginger G and Cheese Face and B. Sorry, Cheese Face. Oh no, you are there, Cheese Face. Sorry, B Smith. Hello to you, B, and Cheese Face. Yes, greetings. And oh yes, Anton, you're thinking AI law, so you're ahead of me. On what the future might look like. Yeah, I'm a bit scared of AI law, but I'll come back to that. But it is, I mean, presumably it will evolve to something useful, rather than I think at the moment something dangerous. But not that I'm against it in terms of artificial intelligence. It's just if you try to ask it a specific problem about a specific thing, it's more difficult. I mean, I can get it to give me fantastic reviews of albums that came out in 1965 or something, but it can't sort of tell me whether a particular person is getting the right amount of. Well, not that I ask it about benefits, but I mean, it wouldn't be able to tell me how to challenge an intentional homelessness decision yet. But we are talking about the future, so I'll come. I'm not. I mean, that will be something for the future rather than now. So back to where we started. I'll just take us to the shared web page. Now, talking about capacity, I think it's time to sort of grasp the nettle in terms of what we do, because for the last however long, we've been coming on on the live streams, and people have been putting messages into the effect of, "How do I find a solicitor?" And we've had to sort of, Karis and I, as solicitors, have had to keep a bit quiet, where we should be saying, "Well, we're solicitors, we can help you," but the problem is we haven't got capacity, or we haven't had capacity, and we're still struggling to deal with what we've got. But we're hoping to expand, and so rather than people being told, "Sorry, we haven't got capacity," what we'd say is that if you look in the link to this show, which is, oops, I just Yeah, there we go. If you look in the link, there's a so the details for this show. There's a link there which you can click on, which will take you to what we were just looking at, and then you can fill that in. This is called Virgo Solicitors New Client Form Simple, and you just give your name. There is a longer form if we were to take the case on, where we ask for details. Oh, Mike's here. Excellent. Hang on a sec. I will add Mike in. So bear with me. I'll just have to read. So bear
Sorry
with me,
guys,
everybody.
just really late. My bad.
No, it's great. We were all, we sort of thought that we imagined you'd said you weren't going to be able to make it. And so I'm
I
going to
said no
add
such
you.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's excellent news, but we sort of,
It might have been me.
so guest 4. And I'm going to just drag and see if this works.
Will, while you're doing that, can I just come in on the AI stuff?
Yes, please.
Because I'm terrified of AI. I hate it. I think it's gonna take away human jobs and all that like boring stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to swallow my words slightly because so I've literally just typed into ChatGPT what you said, like tell me how to challenge an intentional homelessness decision, English law. And in fairness, the response is really clear. It's like 1, request a review, and then it goes into detail. 2, appeal to the county court, goes into detail. 3, complain to the local government ombudsman, goes into detail. 4, seek legal advice and support, and then tells me I might be eligible for legal aid and where I can go to. And I just, whilst it's definitely not a fix, I do think for the average layperson it could be really helpful, even if it's not to make legal arguments, but to understand legal letters that they're getting from the council, and simplifying things. But I think that probably comes into a point I'm going to raise later when you're talking about the discussion topic for today. So, but yeah, I just thought while you were doing the webcam stuff that I'm having to sort of eat my words slightly.
Well,
and
but
try and use it a little bit more for the usefulness.
well, it is good for that sort of thing. But if you ask it, sort of Mr. Smith has been told he's intentionally homeless because he got a possession order for rent arrears, what can we do about it? I think it wouldn't sort of say to you, well, I mean, maybe in the future it will. Was it reasonable for him to occupy? Was it? Maybe we should have a go at that. But it's that sort of thing. By the way, Mike, is your camera? Are you camera enabled tonight, or because? Oh yeah, there you are. Excellent.
And turn that on.
Great. So you missed what you missed, Mike, and I won't go over too much of it again. But I was just saying to everybody that I thought I'd take the plunge and just put a form on here that if people have got a legal problem and they need a solicitor, rather than us saying here's a list of solicitors and then you ring them or get told they've got no capacity, which hopefully they're not doing, but I mean that is a problem. I can't say that we can take every case. So no, I flatter myself that you might want us to, but if we can, we can get some details. So this form here, which I was just talking about, all you got to do is put your contact details in there, and then details of the legal problem, and why, if it's urgent, and then we can look into taking it on. And I guess if you haven't had a response, then you can put a comment on the channel and say what's going on. Last week you said there was a link. So that's that. And to go, let's check the comments again. So, oh yeah, Karis, Karis has said that barrister warns of risks as litigants in person turn to ChatGPT, legal cheat. Yeah, that's.
It's weird you said that. So I was just reading this as before I logged on. So I was like, oh wow. And there would be a risk if people will just Google like a skeleton argument or a defense. They'll just put it in ChatGPT. So it'll be like, and then they've got to stand up in court and refer to it. So that's got to be pretty scary.
Yes. I don't know what the. I would say it's more than risks. I mean, I'd say I'm a bit of a cynic, but I think it would be almost certain that ChatGPT is not GPT, sorry, is not up to being able to take on that role yet. I mean, hopefully it will in the future. Good luck to everybody using it. Cheeseface has added to this discussion. AI is very good for understanding letters, etc., but no substitute for a solicitor. It can tell you what should be happening, but you're still powerless to do anything about them. Yeah, we can threaten JR, but only a solicitor can follow through. Yes. So I'll move on, if that's okay, to what I was going to discuss tonight, which I was just saying before you got here, Mike, was about what the future of legal aid type services might look like and how we might be repopulating legal aid deserts, given that the present system doesn't seem equipped to do it. I mean, they're not going to turn the water back on and the deserts make the desert bloom and all that. But before I do that, I don't know if I've mentioned in passing before a book called Legal Aid Lawyers and the Quest for Justice, which identifies part of the problem, which is that there's the picture of it. This book was written in 2013, and it illustrates part of the problem, which is that if you listen to legal aid lawyers, you would think that the only real problem with legal aid is that there isn't enough money given to legal aid lawyers in order to carry on with their quest for justice, and that the solution is just to to increase the pay rates and various other things. But I've always disagreed with that, even though I am a legal aid lawyer. I've spent much of my career being shocked and embarrassed by what I've seen legal aid lawyers doing in failing to pursue a quest for justice. And sometimes I think that justice is a bit of a grand term for what we're actually doing. We're just trying to clear up a mess sometimes that local authorities make, and it's not about sort of freeing people from unlawful convictions. It's just sort of challenging a decision. But anyway, this book was commissioned where they would sort of he would hopefully write a book saying, "Isn't it great how legal aid lawyers are pursuing a quest for justice?" But what he came up with from his research was that it was the opposite. Well, there was a sort of dissonance between how legal aid lawyers described themselves and then when he sat in the office and watched them at work, what he actually saw. So the essence of it was that they were saying, "Oh, they were committed to the clients and all this," but then in reality, they were sort of laughing about their cases and putting pressure on to plead guilty and everything like that. So the book was not very well received by those who'd commissioned it and the legal aid community generally, which is partly why you've probably never heard of it. But I've got an old hardback. Did you? Sorry, Karis, you said you looked it up on Amazon.com earlier. Was it there? Was it? You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, it's there. So I've never heard of it.
And is it available? I mean, or is it just a sort of you can buy a collector's edition for £20 or something?
No, it's available to buy, but it's £60.
60. Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, my copy was horribly expensive. That's the problem with legal sort of texty books, which don't have very wide. But it's. I mean, it's not really. If you're not a lawyer, it's probably not worth reading in great detail. But and you probably guess the sort of thing it says, which is that basically there's a disconnect between the lawyers and the clients. So if it's okay, let's see. Yeah, I'll just go back to what I was going to talk about for the future. So the reason I mentioned the legal aid lawyers book is that I think we have to be more sort of, and I'd probably Shannon and Mike, you probably, as you're not lawyers, you don't feel the sort of need to sort of big up the legal profession, but I think we have to be more realistic in saying that lawyers aren't necessarily part of the solution and they may be actually part of the problem, and that it's lawyers have sort of part of the breakdown in legal aid is that the relationship between legal aid lawyers and the legal aid agency pretty much broke down, and that was partly because the lawyers taking the mickey and overcharging and stuff. But I'm not going to give any specific examples. But I'm sure anyone who works at the legal aid agency would probably say it's awful working with solicitors. Excuse me. So here's my thought, and I'm saying that probably what we need in the future is going to be a much wider idea of, rather than fighting for justice, it's being able to support people engaging with the social welfare system, which isn't just about coming to the rescue when things go wrong. It's also about helping people access the system. And I've said that there's definitely a need for this, given the increasing complexity of the system, the inaccessibility of the system. And by system, I mean the organisations and services that you associate with the welfare state, really: housing, benefits, social services. I mean that in a nice sense of the word, rather than sort of negative images which it throws up. Because people say, why would I want to go to social services? But you might actually want some social services. But the false assumption which we have at the moment, which is that the system users don't have any problems understanding or challenging decisions, and even that there aren't any such problems anyway. And when I say we, I mean the society at large. I mean, if you look at the media or the courts, or the if you go, you know, you listen to a judge talking about local authorities, they don't usually reflect the fact that most people know that they will inevitably get things wrong. It's oh, they're doing their very best, you know, to and they're the specialists and all this sort of stuff. And I think the media, I don't know if you guys agree with that, but the portrayal of local authorities and housing associations and things in the media is that these are sort of populated by very helpful, compassionate people. Do you think?
I think I know this is going to maybe, I don't know if Shannon's actually mentioned it, but we came across a post on LinkedIn the other day. This is related to what you're asking, Will, by the way, but it's basically like a day in the life of a housing officer written by a housing officer, and essentially like how hard they tried and all this sort of stuff, and essentially they're admitting to gatekeeping a family at risk to DA. It's like the worst DA case I've ever seen, sort of thing. It took them a week to respond, but they're kind of like there was then this huge engagement from presumably lots of other housing officers and lots of other people related to it who just don't seem to be able to actually be honest about how things are. So I don't know that the media is particularly favourable of local authority officers in general.
Maybe not.
Because you certainly when you have like baby P stuff, they kind of very quickly turn on social workers, arguably understandably or not. But so I don't know that it's kind of that sugar coated, but yeah, there's certainly kind of like the homelessness sector, certainly the sort of stuff you see going around on the media, and so is all language exactly as you say. Like everyone's just trying really hard, which is kind of code for everyone's failing. But yeah, they are trying really hard, so it's all right. And I think a lot of charities, I might have said this before,
Yeah.
I think a lot of charity workers, they think because they work their fingers to the bone that they're above criticism, and like it's no longer a question about whether they're doing a good job or like ending homelessness. The kind of things they focus on is just how hard they're trying. So they lose the ability to kind of actually measure that and actually do a good job and actually end homelessness. So yeah, sorry, Chris.
No, I just interrupted you. There was also TV programs that they have people attend the offices, and you've got housing officers going, oh, if you don't get the property, we're going to send you to Birmingham, and you've got 15 minutes to decide. And they're like turned into little videos that are circled on social media, and there's the people getting evicted programs, can't pay, will take it anyway. So there's that like exploitation and glamorized that people have just they're in this situation, but then you've got housing officers where they'll discuss someone's case on the TV, and this person's case where the officers are literally breaking the law because they're discussing it when it's about a family or they're sending someone off to Birmingham. We're literally giving them 15 minutes to decide, and if they don't, they're intentionally homeless. So it's like, well, there's no consideration for that person, and the fact that they're just dryly saying it. So if they're in it and in the office, and how would they defend themselves? How do they know what their rights are? They're not informing them. They're not helping them make a decision. Not preventing homelessness, but they're just making decisions for people.
Are you saying that sort of stuff's making its way onto social media?
Yeah, like they turn it into like little videos, and it's the little clips of just the short social, the housing officer just telling them, and they're like, it's very imbalance of power, and there's no justice there. When
Is this
how
filmed
does
by
someone come in?
the applicant, or is it made by the
No,
council?
so they're from TV programs.
Oh, right, I see.
So they've cut that TV program down to a little video, and it's now online. So social media really is replacing TV.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you've got YouTube, so it's all on there, and the little videos, you're grabbing someone's attention and that focus on that little bit. It's just, and it's completely illegal what this housing officer's done. But you've got the public backing and glamorizing of the situation and the housing officer's job. So she's sitting there in a very much powerful position of a very vulnerable person, putting them in a town miles away from everything they've known in their support network.
Yeah, which is very common nowadays, as we know.
Yeah.
There's no curiosity in those shows either, because I think I remember like an old one with they kind of had shelter involved in the program, but then they got like a person to go and pretend to be homeless and go and approach a London council who promptly gatekept them. And there was like, oh, and yeah, and the sort of narrator was like, oh, this person's not quite followed the law here or something like that. It's kind of like didn't sort of do it justice to what they'd actually just done. They just deprived this person of their own of a safe home. So it's kind of and I've had a few conversations with journalists over the year who have no understanding, don't seem to have any ability to take in the depth of kind of how complicated it can be, or like that yeah, this might be something wrong to actually investigate.
I think as well, like in a lot of the media, I find that I see anyway that a lot of the media, whether it's social media or like newspapers, sort of pit one cohort of homeless people against the other. So often you see it with like immigration, and then the comments are blaming immigrants or asylum seekers being housed for them not being housed. And I think actually the media encourages this because, again, then there's the hate going towards someone else rather than towards the system and sort of the rest of society. And again, it doesn't highlight the fact that you have rights too. It's just highlighting that someone else is utilizing their rights. And I think that goes even like the positive stories. When there's like an asylum seeker family who's got their settled status and got their house. Like I remember watching, she'll kill me for saying this, but the BBC News with my nan, and there was a Ukrainian family being housed, and it was like a really good news story thing. And she was like, why have they been housed though? And there's lots of like, and lots of English people that aren't being housed. Like all the work you do, you tell me that there's gatekeeping and no one's been. And I was like, yeah, but just because they've accessed the law, like the people I work with can also access the law if it wasn't for the gatekeeping and the housing officers and the local authorities denying this is happening. Like it's not just because one person can have it, the other person can't. And I think that's a big problem I see in the media, is that sort of pitting people against each other, because then you can't build those relationships, build that solidarity, and yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, it does. But I mean, without turning this into a rant against the media, but I suppose we could do. But the thing that I find weird, and I think it was some commentator said this a while ago, that, I mean, the level of knowledge that the media assumes that the public have, and the level of technical knowledge that the media themselves have, is so incredibly low in this area. So the assumption is that nobody knows what Part 7 of the Housing Act is, and what intentional homelessness is as a concept. You'd have to have it explained by the voice that's a narrator. There's this thing called intentional homelessness, which a lot of people suffer as a result of. But if you compare that to the coverage of, say, football or cricket, I mean, the commentators on those shows assume that everybody knows who all the teams are, and they do. That's that's the thing. Most people have a sort of really wide knowledge of sports things, whereas they don't know things about their legal rights. Um, but I guess that's for the future as well. Is that how do we have a more informed society where you can actually have a proper debate? Because I mean, once you get all that stuff about whether asylum seekers should be getting housed or not, it often degenerates into just an ignorant sort of discussion based on prejudice and stuff. But if I carry on, I mean, make my little list of things. So what I was saying was we need a system that, or a legal support system, or a right support system that helps people access the whole welfare state and not just deal with the problems, because the problems are going to be inevitable, and they will happen. It's not just that housing officers are sort of unpleasant people. I mean, they're often, I mean, most of them are doing the best they can in a difficult situation. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? It can have side effects that people become sadistic, but I don't think they went into it in order to find an outlet for their. Anyway, that's for another day. But
in defence of housing officers, I think my experience of working in Bedford, and I guess in central Beds a little bit as well, I think the majority, like more than half of them, were all right. But I think what I found was the kind of the culture was dominated by the kind of wrong uns, and they kind of set the tone. But I think the majority of housing officers had, given enough resources, they would follow the law if they could. But they don't, and they don't kind of cause enough noise about the fact that it's all broken or whatever. So they kind of keep breaking the law, nevertheless.
Do you think there's an element? Sorry.
No, please go on.
Do you think there's an element of there's no trust in solicitors and that legal aid for the public? So if they've never used solicitors, they're like, oh, why do we need a solicitor? Because the local authority will do their job. So they have more trust in the local housing authority than they do in a solicitor, because solicitors have kind of that shyster like reputation. Is that a bit of reputation? So you've got to kind of rebrand, and that's where the cute, oh, we're coming in for justice aspect comes in.
I think so, and I think that's like for quite again a particular group of people, right? But then like perhaps another group of people who like know not to trust the local authority and then maybe been screwed over by them before or whatever, they potentially also might not trust solicitors because they're also part of this big system that they don't understand. And again, like, you two are absolutely incredible, but lawyers are so intimidating. Like, as a profession, they're intimidating people. Like, you think, oh, they're going to use big words, they're, really serious, they're really black and white, and what if I get into trouble, and they're not going to be compassionate or whatever. And this is all like stereotypes, of course, because most of the lawyers I've met are absolutely lovely. But I think it's a real problem that it doesn't feel like an accessible or caring profession. And in one sense, homelessness law, it shouldn't have to be caring. It shouldn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, get the job done. I'd rather a GP sort out my medical stuff than be there. At the same time, if that's a barrier to people actually accessing the support and help, that's an issue then, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is worrying that. I mean, I think it's probably true that lawyers and solicitors probably have a lower rating amongst the public than the councils. And I guess that we could discuss why that is, but as you say, Karis, it comes down to a sort of shyster type impression that people get, and a lot of people have had negative. If they've had a divorce or something, they've had some horrible solicitor on the other side saying horrible things about them and trying to take all their money and their kids off them. So I think probably the legal profession is not best suited to doing this job of doing what I do. I mean, I'm not proper. The training I had, I mean, it's got better now, but the training I had as a solicitor was primarily aimed to helping rich people. I spent a lot of time learning about tax when I did law school. I spent weeks learning about inheritance tax and exemptions. And I had one, when we got to the welfare benefits course, it was one afternoon. And that was it. There was no housing law back then. And the assumption was that everyone was going to go off and try and work in the city. So it was almost like it was a different profession from the one I wanted to be in and am in. But the other things I was just thinking as well, I'll just carry on with this. There's the problem that many service users have mental health problems and also language problems, which make it difficult for them to access the system. So there doesn't even need to be anything particularly wrong in terms of a legal issue that's arisen. It's just that if you can't speak English and you're, incapacitated in some way, you are going to need somebody to help you, and at the moment those people just aren't there really. The medical profession is making some progress with the introduction of social prescribers, but I think that's still in its infancy, really, isn't it? They're not really going to roll their sleeves up and help somebody make a homeless application. So I think going down that road, though, I think it would be the same sort of approach, though, as as you. I mean, well, people start complaining about everything, but GPs are sort of struggling to provide a decent service as well. I find a lot of the time now that they're sort of it's difficult to get an appointment and stuff. But there is an idea that people recognise that people do need GPs recognise that people do need support, and you don't have to wait for some legal crisis or the equivalent to come up. But the couple of problems I've thought of that are the other side of the coin. If you had these people, ideally, that were there to help people engage with the system, I put there is a problem that some service users might get lazy and just rely on the support people for basically taking their rubbish out or something when they didn't need that. That would need to be monitored, because I sometimes feel that if I when I'm dealing with people, I get phone calls saying sort of the sink's blocked. What are you going to do about it? And haven't you tried calling the council? Now that's your job. And I said, well, I can't do all of that. And another problem is just the enormous amount of funding it would require. And again, you might just create another sort of failing sector as well. That because we had this in the past 25 years ago or so, the legal aid after the new Labour came in, actually, the legal aid agencies started trying to set up their own legal, the sort of law centre type things. I've forgotten what they were called now. But it was a complete failure anyway, because they just thought we'll throw a load of money at it and we'll try and cut out the lawyers. But they just had people that were copying and pasting large amount of texts into emails and things. So yeah, the
Can I
other
ask
problem.
this?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead, please.
Do you think there's also a kind of resistance to change in terms of housing law and lawyers trying to come into it, and they set up charities and stuff like this, and work with the legal aid? Do you think there's kind of a resistance of, oh, they'll do it in theory, but when it comes down to the practice and the day-to-day, I suppose, doing it? And do you think there's kind of a resistance from where
You
they go,
amongst the
oh,
legal profession.
well, kind of the legal aid and the resistance from local authorities and the public to really work together and change as like the law is changing now, but it's kind of more fast paced and what it's slower than what the public needed. So we're kind of behind the housing crisis, then the damp and the mold, systemic issues in people's houses. There's kind of they haven't come up with, and still the Grenfell Tower, they haven't. They've even said now that they wouldn't do cladding because it's too expensive. So they're going to rip down tower blocks because it'd be cheaper to rehouse people than do the repairs that need doing.
Which sort of, I think there's a sort of phenomenon that I think applies to a lot of organisations and particularly to the legal profession, which is that it's the same equivalent about the common cold, that if there was a cure for the common cold, it might be suppressed quite heavily by the pharmaceutical industry, who would obviously lose a lot of money by not being able to market cold remedies. And I think there's an element of saying, well, actually, we don't really want the system to change because we're making, as long as we just deal with crises when they come up, we don't want to stop the crises happening.
Yeah.
And that may, I'm not saying there are solicitors out there rubbing their hands and thinking, isn't it great? People are getting messed around because I can make money out of it. But I think the business model of solicitors is dependent on a sort of steady flow of problems. And if somehow you miraculously stop people making if you enhance the quality of homelessness decisions, by 500%, there'd be a market drop in legal challenges, which a lot of lawyers wouldn't be happy about. And then there's the other problem, which I think we talked about last week, which ties in with this, that if you do set up and you do try and work together, what you might call constructive engagement, you then almost become part of the problem because you're sort of It's like the charities that work closely with housing departments, or Bernardo's going and setting up advice booths within detention centres. And you think, well, it could be that it's a sort of George Orwell type vision, isn't it? You can't tell who the goodies and the baddies are. And that is getting to the end of my. So I'm sorry it's not very well thought out. But what I've said is, if we moved away from a lawyer-based system to a health service type system, legal services in the future might be better funded by the NHS or supplemented by the NHS rather than the Ministry of Justice, which has a sort of strange thing that the same people that are funding magistrates' courts for sentencing people for sort of stealing cars are funding challenging local authority decisions, which all seems a bit odd. And it could be that the Department of Environment and other service providers would provide a support service as part of a recognition that the system will inevitably throw up problems, and it's better to sort of deal with them organically and as part of the process rather than having a confrontational adversarial group of people outside who are sort of hassling them while they try to perceive that they try to do their job. Got a couple of comments, and please do feel free to interrupt me because I'm hogging the microphone, as it were. But I'll just go back to the comments, which I think we got here. We've got Anton. I think if the language of law had clarification for the meaning of words, as well as young adults being taught law as part of schooling, maybe this would give people a head start. Definitely, yeah. And also, it would give people a head start and understand their situation so they didn't always need lawyers, if you see what I mean.
And so this is what's really weird to me, and it kind of goes to what you were talking about with the legal sector, but I feel like the homelessness sector is really changing. So there's been a number of events, talks, whatever, that I've gone to recently that has really openly and like encouraged by the audience and stuff, talking about how people can get a career in homelessness and how they can get a career in the charity sector dealing with homelessness. And part of me was like, okay, fair play, we're admitting that we're not trying to end homelessness here. And then part of me was like, well, hold up. This is like such a 360 or whatever. Of like, okay, so now we're just fully admitting that we're carry on profiting and making careers out of this. But what was really interesting, like with that comment there, is like we're like, oh yeah, we're not going to end homelessness, but we're going to make, you know, careers in the homelessness sector now, rather than like, yeah, let's teach young adults their rights. Let's teach them like how to make complaints. Let's teach them to be adversarial, or like let's teach them to be their own advocates and empower them and all of this sort of stuff that would probably have, you know, I'm not saying it would end homelessness, but like it would have a massive impact in 30 years' time if you had a whole generation of people who knew their rights and knew what to do. And I think that links in as well to something you said earlier, Will, about potentially people being lazy. And I know you didn't mean it like that, but it was really interesting to me because I probably was a massive pain in Mike's behind after he first housed me, because every small issue that I thought had anything to do with my housing, Mike, on like constant, even to this day, like Mike's laughing, because even to this day, if I get a letter from BPHA, you know, my housing association, I'm like, Mike, what does this mean? Am I going to be evicted in 2 months' time? Like, we know lawyers, don't we? So that I'll be fine. Like, and I think it's that fear, and it really highlights that you guys obviously do such a good job, because when you've been failed by the rest of the system, then you encounter a problem, you're so scared of going back into that place that you're like, right, I'm going to ask the one person who actually helped me. And that's what it's highlighting to me. And I think if we had that earlier on, like what this comment's saying, I feel like I've jumbled like 4 different points there into one. Hopefully you've got what I've meant there.
There's really interesting stuff in there, what you said. What I think, just going back to what Anton said, is I think that the language of law, the language that lawyers and professionals use, is often designed to be exclusive. And I mean, there's no need for lawyers to use some of the daft expressions we do, like disbursements. I mean, who else uses that as a, like that means we spend money on things, and enhancements. That means we're going to have an extra bit on our fees because we had to work an emergency. I don't know. You start having to learn all these terms, and then that's before. I mean, fortunately, all the Latin stuff's tended to be phased out over recent years. So, but the other thing, what was I going to say, Shannon? That you said the thing I get, and this is a feeling I get, and I shouldn't pat myself on the back, but I worry. Sometimes I get when people are contacting me and going, "Will, sort of my drain's broken and stuff." Um, I'm thinking, well, I don't blame them because I'm the only person in the whole process that's shown that picked up the phone when they called or replied to their email. And I'm not saying that that makes me a saint. It's just that my function allows me to do that up to a degree. But then the downside of that is when I'm dealing with a problem for somebody, I have to sort of try to extract myself from their situation at a point where I feel I've done the minimum that I was supposed to do. So legal aid is limited. So if somebody moves into a new place and they're not happy with it, or they want to claim compensation for getting messed around, I can't help with that. Whereas I really like to. And also, if they're just having trouble settling into the area, or they can't get help accessing things. But I just have to say, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't justify the further expense of the legal aid agency and stop. But there would be, I mean, hopefully in the future, I mean, something we've talked about trying to set up is some sort of system that would provide some support for people after they've reached the end of the legal aid scope stuff, and particularly making complaints. It'd be really nice if there was an organisation that you could go to that would take all your papers and draft an ombudsman and draft a formal complaint for you. But it seems quite naive to that because however simple they try and say it is, it's not really. It isn't that easy to make an ombudsman complaint yourself, is it? Or to what do you think, Mike? Because you've done more of that than me, but do you think you could produce a sort of leaflet that would enable people to do it themselves?
Yeah, I think
You've done videos on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I think I think it just depends. It's going to partly depend on. I think it sounds like you guys were talking about it when I kind of joined, but just the whole like how you use AI, because like the ability to kind of consume, like one of the things ChatGPT is really good at is if you just stick in a section with that 184 notification and say, can you summarize this in 2 paragraphs, it will do a really good job. So I think if people were like tech savvy and kind of use ChatGPT to kind of both understand and to write their complaints, I think it becomes far less sort of formidable. And so I think it's possible, but I think obviously there are going to be some people who've got so much on the plate that's just not, they're not in a place to do so. And I think also local authorities will be nasty to you if you do it. There's chance of like retaliatory action. And I think people also probably, they get the first stage complaint which is not upheld, and they kind of think, okay, well, the letter seems to have made sense, so I'm just going to give up. Whereas actually, like that's the time to kind of dig in, because that's almost like a good sign that they've responded. So I think that's the. So I think it is possible, but I guess not everyone's going to be in that position to do it. And actually, as I say, if you've got like 100 things to worry about if you're in TA or something, and you've got water flowing down the wall and stuff, you should be the one doing it. So I think if National Lottery are listening or whatever, they should be putting out funding for partnerships between charities and legal firms, because you get a lot more for your money. Then you kind of get a lot more impact for what you're doing. Because the legal casework's done by legal aid, then you've got people also kind of doing that, not just the kind of complaining, but I mean when we discussed that, we kind of like the ideal was to kind of get furniture for people, help people get vouchers for people go and buy furniture, fit carpets in some situations as well, things like that with the person. So it wasn't kind of like, here's a bunch of stuff that you haven't chosen, but actually kind of finding ways to help people invest in the home, which I think for people who being homeless for a long time was actually quite important part of that journey onwards. So I think all of that stuff would make sense for the funder to do, but the problem is that those kind of national lottery funder type people, they've got the easiest job in the world because their job is to spend the money. It doesn't matter if it's on a good thing or not. So, but I think that would be a really good way to work, a really kind of powerful way to work if they were to do that. So yeah, as I say, if you're listening, National Lotteries, you should put it in. Yeah.
Leave a comment and we'll get back to you. So the interesting distinction between our two shows is that, I mean, maybe I don't know what. Maybe it just comes with time, but people aren't actually posting legal questions on this, which is quite nice in a way because it's difficult to work. It's hard work getting through all those, but I think this is more of a sort of general, not hot air discussion, but abstract discussion show. But I'm hoping to make it more practical in the future. And we got a comment here from Tiff. It's the echoes back. Does anybody else having that problem? But it's fine at this end. But I'm only hearing a limited amount. But I think actually that's not you echoing. Mike was. Oh no, Mike. There's a jinx on here, isn't there? That you wear different headphones and still happens. But well, hopefully we'll sort it out one of these days. But I think that's just about everything. Unless anybody's got a lot more to say in it, and I might just wind it up now actually because I'm a bit tired. Does anyone else want to talk about anything particular? Okay.
Just to say, Will, if I could, the live stream on Thursday is actually on Wednesday this week again. So for anyone who's joining the Thursday night, it'll be Wednesday.
Is it not Housing Committee Wednesday?
It is, because I'm going to leave the Housing Committee and run home and get on at 7:30. It's all under control.
Great, and I should say I'm not going to be here next Monday, so there won't. The next one of my live streams will be 2 weeks' time. So, well, I'll hopefully see people on Wednesday, and then in a week on Monday. So, thanks everybody for taking part tonight, and thanks for your comments. And see you next time. Bye. Actually, I don't want to leave. I'm pressing the wrong button. I want to end this one here, which is that. Yeah.